welcome to the Hadassah Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Claire Marrinan. The Hadassah Collective is a unique, wellness-centered community created in and inspired by India, the birthplace of holistic health disciplines. The Hadassah Collective Podcast brings together a carefully curated selection of my most trusted and inspiring innovators from every area of the health and wellness space. I invite my guests to freely share their gifts, their wisdom, their journeys, and their diverse points of view, discussing a vast range of topics including shutdown and self-isolation strategies, integrated diet and fitness, yogic science, modern mental health, and holistic lifestyle, all to inspire you with relatable tools to help you consciously customize, support, and expand your life. Today, it's a pleasure to invite Sarah Lewis back to the Hadassah Collective Podcast. Sarah Lewis is an intuitive business coach, and in this episode, we talk about the new paradigm business model, a new way of working and conducting business while integrating the divine feminine flow into our workspace and our business practices. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Sarah. Welcome back to the Hadassah Collective. It's so amazing to have you here again. Let's get straight into it and start talking about, give us a brief overview of who you are, what you do, and where you are in the world at the moment.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, for having me again. And I'm really excited for this conversation. And to keep it pretty brief, I am Sarah Lewis, and I'm an intuitive business coach. I can get into that a little bit more probably further in our conversation. But I am originally from Switzerland and have been living in Dubai for 2 years now, which is pretty crazy how time flies. But yeah, that's a little just brief introduction.
Especially this year. I feel that this year has disappeared. The first couple of months were really, really slow, and then all of a sudden we're in December already. So,
I know time has been very strange this year. It's been slow and fast at the same time. Just such a strange year, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, why don't we talk a little bit about how you got started on this path and describe your early life and where you grew up and what that looked like? And was there any elements of that that shaped the path that you're on today?
Well, definitely. I think this is such an interesting question because I think that obviously a lot of us are, in a sense, still affected or still growing through some of the things we experienced in childhood. And I mean, for me, one of the major things in my life early on was that we were always moving. And I moved 13 times before I was 12.
Wow.
For different reasons. My dad was losing his job a lot, and because of the industry he was in, and it kept like all the businesses he was working for kept on going out of business, and he had to find something else. We were moving then a lot, and I felt like that was very, and it wasn't anyone's fault, but it was very unstable. But at the same time, I learned to adapt a lot, which I'm grateful for. And I still see in me this need for some kind of stability. Although I love traveling and I'm okay with changes in general, I still need some kind of base and structure in my life, probably in part from that. And I also had to change schools a lot when I was in the early years of going to school. So when I was 5, I think, and I went to so many different schools in the first few years, which was hard. And as a pretty introverted person, it was never easy to integrate, and I always felt like I had to protect myself. So that was also a big thing, and being bullied in school, all of those, I think, has definitely had an impact on my path and my life, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I'll just fast forward a little bit to more recently. I initially studied law, which has nothing really to do with what I'm doing now. And I always knew deep down that it wasn't the path for me, but it was what was expected of me by especially my grandfather and my family in general. So I just felt like, even if deep down I knew I wanted to do something more creative and something different, I didn't know what it was. And it was just easier to follow that path that was already laid out for me. And that took a while for me to finally break out of.
Yeah.
And when I finally did, I didn't only leave that path. So I did finish my master's. I have a master's in law, but didn't really, it wasn't very useful. But I left that. And I also left a long-term relationship that was in 2016, left a job that I had that was really good and I enjoyed and learned a lot from, in search of what I really wanted to do and what I guess my soul calling was. So I traveled a little bit and finally found coaching.
Mm.
I had a coach who was also a healer, because that's the spiritual part is very important to me too.
Yeah.
And that changed my life. And then I studied coaching, initially holistic health coaching, which was amazing. And naturally then moved into more spiritual life coaching and now intuitive business coaching. So there's always that aspect of it that is more um, intuitive and spiritual, that is very important to me. But I also like the grounded aspect of it. And yeah, so that's kind of a fast forward of my entire life, the
Yeah.
major moments.
And I think you blend both of those things really beautifully. And it's just
Thank
in your
you.
job description, intuitive business coach, it really describes those elements of you, that you're bringing that creativity, intuition into something that's very grounded, like business, So I think that's incredible. And so tell us a little bit about this moment in around 2016 when you had all of these things going on in your life. Would you describe that time as like a dark night of the soul or an awakening, and like how did you navigate out of that and through those different things?
Wow, such an interesting question. I wondered a lot if that was, what we call, I guess, the dark night of the soul or awakening. And to be honest, I never felt like it was that clear of
Yeah,
of
a
a
moment.
moment. Yeah, so for me, it was more just like growth and natural evolution. But I guess some people would call it maybe an awakening in a sense. Um, and navigating that was for sure not easy, especially not knowing where to turn to and who to talk to about all of that, and feeling very lonely. I did have my sister, who was always one of my best friends, right? So I could talk to her, but she's 6 years younger, so it was also very there's a gap there too.
Yeah.
And I think that's when having someone, a coach of some sort, to talk to and help guide me through that was very, very important for me.
Mm.
And that's why I do what I do, it in a way, one
Yeah.
of the reasons at least.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. And were there any different modalities that helped you navigate that time, like meditation or
Mhm.
chanting or something like this? Prayer?
Definitely. Definitely, prayer has always been in my life. Even if I never identified as being religious,
Hmm.
I always prayed. And I remember even very early on praying to life, because that just resonated with me
Mm.
more. Although now I'm okay with like praying to God, right,
Yeah.
in a non-religious way. But I remember it was 10. It was interesting. But prayer was always there. Meditation helped me a lot. And actually, I think one of the things as well before meditation was yoga.
Mm.
When I started yoga, I naturally just felt this pull towards a practice
Yeah.
of some sort through yoga, and also then meditation. So that definitely helped me. I think writing, journaling always was very important
Yeah.
in my life. So I think overall, those were grounding and grounding practices that helped me through a lot.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. And in terms of like moving, I also had a very similar experience. Not quite as many moves as you actually, but I always see that as kind of like the gift and the wound in one go, because it is
Yeah.
quite disruptive as a young child, and to move and change schools and to move homes all the time. And yet I am the same. I always credit it as such a gift because I can literally I'm not afraid to like land in India, know two people, and know that people will gravitate towards me that are meant to be in my life. And I guess the same with you, like moving to Dubai, like, you're free to do that. You don't have that binding. But I think when you are a kid, it is kind of disruptive, and there is always that wounding and that gift in the one. So how do you think that impacted you? I mean, for me, I think it really taught me to adapt really quickly to my environment, which is again a good thing and a bad thing. And sort of later on, it was a deconstructing process of like, what part of this is me, or what part of this did I pick up because I knew I needed to be that to fit in and to be accepted and loved and what have you. So how do you think that impacted you?
So interesting. And I love how you say, the gift and the wound at once. I think that's very, very true. For me, definitely adapting to different environments and circumstances. But I do think that part of me had to put on this protective layer very early on from not only moving, but also being bullied young, the first year in school basically by the teacher and some young kids. So that was really a very impactful experience, I'd say. And I'm still learning to open up more, right? Because that's been there for a while. And because I said, right, that I always, I think, craved more stability. It wasn't always that easy for me to, it wasn't actually that easy for me to pick up my bags and leave. My sister left at 18. She went from Switzerland to Hawaii and lived there for a year. And I was like, what? And I think I went the opposite side, and I was like craving that security and stability. And also realizing later on, looking into astrology, I have a Capricorn North Node. So it's all about that in a sense. North Node is about life purpose. I don't know who really and how much the audience knows about this, but just as a little
it's interesting because ours is we share the same sun sign of Sagittarius, and but our north nodes are actually the opposite. That's interesting because mine's Cancer, and so the south node is Capricorn. And
interesting.
Yeah, explain a little bit about what the north and south node is for people who don't know.
Yeah, so it's basically just in simple terms, I guess, your life purpose, the path that your soul chose for you for this lifetime. And obviously, we look at the signs, but we also look at the houses in which they are in. And I'm not going to expand on that too much because it then gets complicated. But and it's very interesting to look at your north node because that is kind of what you're being called to lean into more and release some aspects of your south node. So in my case, releasing some and still keeping the good, right, in Cancer. But there is sometimes some codependency there a little bit, some being maybe overly emotional and things like that, and very in flow, which is great, but learning to be a little bit more practical and grounded. That's for me in my case, and it has definitely made a difference. I've been leaning into that more this year. That definitely helps me a lot. So it's interesting that we're talking about that and we have opposite ones.
Yeah, because I heard it described once, and this really resonated with me, that the south node is like something you've already mastered, is like those aspects you've already mastered, and the north node is what you're growing and evolving into. And I thought that was so beautiful because, and I can even look at, I'm sure you can too, when you look at your earlier life, you can probably see aspects of that and you're like, yeah, I totally mastered that. And for me, I was much more structured and, very, get things done kind of energy about me in like my 20s especially. And, and I'm really am just learning to like lean into that more intuitive feeling flow state of Cancer. And so it's interesting that we have the opposite ones.
Yeah, I think it's very complimentary though, because there's so much to learn there. Yes, absolutely. I love this way of describing it. Like the South Node is a lot of what you mastered, your soul mastered past lives or something like that. And the North Node is it's not natural to us to go there,
Yeah.
but it is for our growth and evolution.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's beautiful. It's really interesting. And
Yeah.
so tell me, what has been some of your greatest successes? If you look back on everything, what have been some of your greatest successes, and what did you learn from that, and how did you move into
Mm.
those?
I love that question. I think just like also because I was just looking back and talking about some of the steps that I went through, I think one of my greatest successes for me was being able to, after 5 years of studying law, of having everything set up in front of me, saying no to that because I knew that deep down it wasn't for me, but it was hard.
Yeah.
And looking back, I was like, it took me a while, a long time, 5 years to finally say no to that and yes to what I wanted and
Mm.
even just allow myself to go there and to discover not knowing exactly what it looked like. So I think that is one of them for sure. That was me starting to step in my power more, I feel. So I
Yeah.
feel that was one of them. And just in general, all the times I followed my truth or my heart
Yeah.
and not what was expected of me, which has not always been easy in my life for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's amazing. I think I love that you've chosen that actually, instead, not just a physical success, but it's
Yeah.
those moments that you advocated for yourself and you went, no, this is what I want. And that would have been really scary. Well, not just scary, but like, did you have moments when you were making that decision of, am I self sabotaging? Am I doing the wrong thing? Because I'm sure your family would have been like, you've worked so hard, like you're nearly there. Why? I'm sure you had all of
Mm.
that. So, how did you sort of process that and be able to decipher that this is really what my heart is calling me to do? This is what my sole purpose is. And without even really knowing what that looked like exactly,
Hmm.
and discerning between that and, am I self-sabotaging, am I doing the wrong thing, and stepping out of that fear.
Mm, good question. Um, I think I just knew deep down that
Mm,
it wasn't for me the minute I went into that direction of studying law. I just felt somewhere, that intuition,
yeah.
that subtle voice, but also the feeling. Even if I wasn't into all of that and I didn't know much about that,
Mm,
i I knew deep down that it wasn't right, and I just learned to shut that down or not listen to
mm,
it for a very long time, and I got really good at it, but at some point I think it was just so loud I couldn't ignore it. And it was risky because one of the big themes in my life was always being kind of a people pleaser and doing what was expected of me, and that required me like stepping out of that completely and
yeah.
disappointing people that I loved, disappointing people that I looked up to,
Mm,
and being potentially judged for it, which it was the case for sure. A lot of people said like, "What are you doing? This doesn't make sense."
mm,
And still don't understand why or what I'm doing, but that's okay. And I think it was just that. It was just that knowing was always there and it became so loud. There was no question that that was what I had to do.
yeah.
It was just a matter of when and how. So I didn't really have times asking myself if I was self-sabotaging in that way. I did ask myself if it was crazy for sure. But I think deep down I always knew that and trusted
Yeah.
that there was something else.
Yeah. That's amazing to have that level of trust.
It
And
wasn't always easy though, I have to say.
no, no, absolutely not. I think it's funny. I mean, I guess that's why I do these podcasts, because people just see, experts like yourself just doing all these really interesting, amazing things. And sometimes we get caught up and we forget that there's like a human behind that story. And, there are definitely hard decisions and shifts, to
Yeah.
be made there. So I think it's really interesting to hear those. And who are some of
Yeah.
your major influences in your life, whether they're in your family or personal life or celebrities or public figures?
That's a very interesting question. Um, I'm thinking now because no one really pops into my mind.
Wow, you're your own
Because
inspiration.
no, not that way. I think it's because I've had a lot and it changes, right? So I have people. I'm, by the way, a human design and manifesting generator, so have like lots of different things
Yeah,
happening,
going on.
going on, and I think it's the same with people who inspire me. So, like now looking back, I'm not too sure. Nowadays, I can say from now, I really am inspired by people, obviously, who have done so much and are really like further along in their
Yeah.
journeys, but also by people who are just like a few steps ahead of me.
Yeah.
Um, in business, for example, and I think that is very inspiring to me because sometimes online we see like these huge overnight successes or
Yeah.
quote unquote overnight successes, and that does not necessarily feel as true to me as someone who's been through the same struggles and is authentic in that way. So I know I'm not really answering your question. I'm sorry, but yeah, there's no one who
really stands out.
really. I think one of the books that really made a difference now looking back was, do you know Melissa Ambrosini?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That that for some reason was something like, I think her story, how she wrote it in Mastering Your Mean Girl, that was back, I think I read that in 2015 or even before. That made a difference and started opening up my mind to what was possible. And yeah, I've been inspired by her, especially in the like early years of starting all of this. So yeah, I would, if I were to say someone,
I
maybe.
find
Yeah.
her really interesting as well. I think, and her partnership with her husband is really beautiful as well. I think that it's really
Absolutely.
so healthy, the way that they really encourage each other and support each other. I think it's really beautiful. I think she wrote a book on that as well, but
Open Wide, yeah.
okay, she did,
Yeah.
and so
Beautiful book.
But I think, interestingly enough, I also read Mastering Your Inner Mean Girl like a really long time ago, and when I read that book, it was kind of like, oh wow, I'm not the only one that has this voice in my head that's like me, hammering me and criticizing me and pushing me, So I think that was one of the gifts of her book. That it kind of made you realize, oh, hang on a second, I'm not the only person that's super hard on myself, and how to move out of that. So I think that was a really interesting book.
Yeah, no, and looking back, actually, I told you after 2016, I left everything. I traveled a little bit. I went to Australia, and I was with my sister, and we went to two of her, at the time she was doing goddess groups in Sydney, and I went to two of those, and I think that definitely inspired me to do the work that I'm doing, even if now it's very different. But I still look up to her in that sense and love her books.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess
So
I'm glad that came back.
Speaking of books and resources, are there any other books that you think would be useful to our listeners? Any books, podcasts, or YouTube channels that you really think are inspiring?
Ooh, there's so many. Again, like there's so many books. Um, A Return to Love. Have you read that one?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
a really
it's one of
common
my
one,
Bibles.
actually. Yeah, it's a really common one mentioned on here. I think that it's, it is like a Bible.
Yeah, that is one that's still with me, and I've read it several times, and I'll definitely go back to it. At first, the first time though, I did not resonate with it at all. I couldn't get through the first chapter, but then I think it was just a question of timing. I read it again and really loved it. A New Earth. Also, by Eckhart Tolle. I never really know how to pronounce his name, but that is a very, I think even more than The Power of Now. A New Earth for sure definitely was huge for me. And what else? Well, I was saying Mastering Your Mean Girl, Open Wide by Melissa Ambrosini. Those were good, definitely lighter reads. And I'm thinking, I also really love Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, right? About creativity, and I loved how she explained about ideas having this kind of almost contract with some people, but if you don't act on it, if you don't go with it, then the idea might go to someone else. So I think that was a really nice way to explain it, and I really like that book. So I think those are the ones coming up for me right now
Yeah, they're
that
really good
really made a
recommendations.
difference.
Yeah, really good recommendations. So coming back to the present, what does your current daily routine look like? I know in Dubai, you kind of have moved out of lockdown now, and
Yes.
everything is open, and everybody's just being sensible, I think. But
Hmm.
what does your daily routine look like?
So I love this question. And also, I've seen it change a lot this year for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I used to do a lot of things as a daily kind of practice and routine. I wanted to simplify a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
most days it's meditation,
Yeah,
some journaling to align myself with my vision, depending on what's happening as well. I think that always helps me come back to alignment. And I would say I still love cacao. That's been with me all year. And I
yeah,
was wondering the other day, how did I have enough cacao all year with lockdown? And sometimes I had to order it and it was taking a long time, but it was with me, that spirit of cacao that is so beautiful, that I love working with. It's been with me all year. So I'm very thankful for that. I think it helped me a lot.
yeah,
And that is part of my morning routine. So meditation, journaling, and cacao. So I simplified it a little bit
yeah.
from what I used to do a few months ago.
Mm.
And that feels good. I also don't, I'm not very rigid with that. And I try to work out a few times a week. It's funny because I alternate between yoga and lift, or what am I trying to
Like
say?
strength training.
Weights,
Mm-hmm.
weightlifting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very different.
Well,
So I try to do that and be more active, because I definitely suffered in lockdown not being able to go out, and realize how important, I knew this, but how important it is for me to move my body.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then I usually get to work around 10, 11, have client calls. Um, I'm trying to be more organized in my week. So Mondays are my days to focus on my vision, what I call my CEO days,
Yeah.
and focused on, yeah, the bigger vision for me. And then the other days are clients, content creation, connecting with people, and things like that. So it looks different a little bit every day, but that's the idea.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. And I think it's interesting. I found this anyway during lockdown because I was at the first couple of months or the first when we were really in lockdown, I was like, wow, I have this time and I can do whatever I want to do, all the things I don't have
Hmm.
time for. And I made myself really busy. And I was like, oh, I'm going to meditate for longer and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then I realized in doing those things that actually that's not necessarily like more is not necessarily better, and I think
Yeah,
you
that's
have to
true.
go through that process to do that. And then I kind of scaled it back again. I also have really simplified again. And
Oh, that's good. It feels good. I mean, there's different phases, right, in life. Sometimes we need more, but yeah, I think keeping it simple helps.
yeah, 100%. And how has this shutdown period that we went through? I know that Dubai has been open for quite some time, since the end of May, I think, correct? So
Yes,
quite a few
exactly.
months. Exactly. And other people are going through their second round of lockdown, and other people are
Mm,
coming out of lockdown. But how has this period impacted your day-to-day life? And what have you learned during that period, or what's really brought you joy that you're going to be bringing into this new world, I guess, that we're all moving into.
very good question. I feel like it was such a long time ago now that I'm thinking about it, like how this year went by so fast and at the same time so slow. Um, Lockdown was definitely challenging, because it brought up a lot of, I think, things to the surface that I had forgotten about myself. And
Yeah,
there was this frustration, this almost like anger coming up that we were being locked down. And I understand why, but it was like there and it was hard. And then feeling alone, I think. And the funny thing is that I actually work from home. So I
mm,
spend most of my days at home. Some days I don't even go out necessarily if I have a lot of things to do. So nothing really changed for me, but it was just this idea, which is so interesting. So it brought up a lot of I guess shadows
Yeah.
and wounds that I had to look at and sit with. So yeah, I think that that process that is always ongoing, the healing process, was heightened at that time for me. And it also actually probably was a turning point in my life and my work, how I want to continue supporting others moving forward. And yeah, but it's funny how it feels like it was such a long time ago, and
Yeah.
it wasn't. But I feel for everyone who is in lockdown again, especially like a second round. That must be really, really tough. And what I think what brought me joy during lockdown, well, definitely my cacao brought me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
Um, Small things like just sitting outside on the balcony, because it was beautiful weather at that time, and then we got hit by the summer, which wasn't as fun. Went out of lockdown, but it was beautiful weather. So just sitting outside, plants. I planted a few seeds at the very beginning of lockdown, and then seeing them grow, that was magical. Yeah, just those small little things in life that we
Yeah.
sometimes forget, and seeing things in a new perspective, right? Like how grateful I was when we were finally able to go out, things like that, that I just took for granted for so long, right? Just
Yeah.
that freedom of going outside. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
definitely.
We're all missing the traveling, the freedom to travel. I think is a big
Yeah,
one. Yeah, you must be missing your family as well in Switzerland and
I
Switzerland in
am.
general.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been hard. And there's been a lot of changes as well in my family. So um, that it's been good. It brought up some, I think it put things into perspective for a lot of people.
Very
And
much.
my mom, for example, is going to be retiring early, which I would have never thought of, possible for her, because she never wanted to. And she realized, I think, this year that like life is short, and that's precious. So she'll be moving to Portugal
Oh wow.
um, soon. And I think that's really good for her. So I'm happy for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've heard a lot of stories like that actually, of people who are
Hmm.
just like, you know what, I still have things to do, and why am I spending my whole life working? And I want to go and do those things now. So I think that's been a
Hmm.
really cool, positive thing. Um,
Yeah.
People tuning into themselves as well and really
Yeah.
awakening. I think this has been a hugely
Hmm.
awakening, breaking open year.
Yes, breaking open
Like,
and
yeah.
growing pains. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and even, it's funny because I feel like I've been on a spiritual path for a really long time. Like I've been very much in tune with that growth process for a really long time and very interested in it and into it. But I
Hmm.
think this year has just been like, even deeper and really
Yeah.
necessary for us as a collective. And so that's beautiful, and I can't wait to see how it's unfolding. It is unfolding. I'm seeing it all around me as well, So it's great to see. But let's talk
I
now
agree.
about intuitive business coaching. So tell us a little bit about what that is and what people
Hmm.
can expect from your coaching sessions, and what
Mm.
kind of businesses, is this really suited for?
Right. Such a good question. Again, I feel like every question is so perfectly timed and formulated. So thank you. So what it is, I feel like I can explain this two ways.
Mm-hmm.
But part of me wants to explain this as really holding space for someone and their transformation. So that means that, yes, I work with soulpreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
heart led entrepreneurs who have service based businesses. So that is often coaching, but it's also astrologers, readers, healers, and other kinds of services,
Mm-hmm.
right? and and yes, we work on their business, but it's also so much deeper. And it's really this, I feel, this container that is safe for them and helps them expand.
Yeah.
And I've experienced this myself in working with someone,
Mm-hmm.
um, a business coach as well, who is not as much into like this spirituality, although she is open to it. But just having that ability to be held and seen, and also just sometimes when we're standing in our own way, someone helping us get out of that, that is so expansive
Yeah.
and has helped me transform a lot and grow a lot. So that's what I guess, in a sense, coaching is, in case people are not really familiar with that. And for me, my approach is intuitive business coaching. So I don't really have this very structured way of working with people. It's very intuitive, and I balance both the feminine and the masculine, the spirituality, the inner transformation with some strategy, but that is very aligned with my clients. So we look at alignment um, in every way. I also look at their human design, a little bit of astrology to help them really be who they are and be and step in their full power in that way, to run their business as well and have an impact as well, while also allowing some income to come in. So it's really having that ripple effect, I feel, helping others who are helping others, and spreading this wave of new way of doing business and new way of living
Yeah.
in our purpose, in alignment, led by our hearts, our souls, which is very important. So I think that covers most of what I do, and who I work with.
Mm-hmm.
I work with mostly women as well, just because that's kind of naturally the people who come to me. But yeah, I also feel it's very important for us women to step more and more in our power and allow ourselves to have an impact, but also earn some income from our energy and our work and our gifts, which hasn't always been easy,
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
I really love how you blend these two things together, because I find so often that people get really ignited on this kind of spiritual path, and then suddenly are like, okay, I want to be a yoga teacher. I want to do something spiritual. I want to be a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
Whereas, sometimes I feel that, like, we don't necessarily need like many more 200-hour yoga teachers in the world. It's
Yeah.
more taking that spiritual wholeness and
Yeah.
that recognition of your own power, and seeing where that leads you and where that needs to be brought into the world. Like, different arenas need
Yeah.
that energy as well. So I think that
I
that's
agree.
a really good crossover. And I could see this being so beneficial for someone also that already has a business and has been doing things one way, and sort of knows that there's more in them, there's more creativity, and this would be a really good way of tapping into that and expanding that into something more authentic and bigger.
Absolutely.
And yeah, yeah.
Yes, I like that you pointed that out, because I actually worked with, well, a few people, but one client in particular is coming to my mind, and she has a very successful business,
Mm.
and obviously earning a lot of income and all of that. So, and it's so interesting that she came to me because she's at a very different stage in her business and in her life. And we just looked at some of the deeper things happening there, and she was also very interested in all the more spiritual part and how she could do it in a way that was more authentic to her and more aligned with her. And we also saw that she's a projector, and that made so much
Yeah.
sense and just was such an eye opener for her. So a projector and human design are not, just for the little side note as well, they're not meant to work that hard and all the time. They're not meant for the 9 to 5. They need to take breaks, and they're here to be guides and leaders, but in a different way than we've been kind of taught. And it's, yeah, and it was really fascinating to see her transformation in our work together.
Do you think understanding and aligning yourself to your human design has made a huge impact to you? Has it been freeing and illuminating to you? Because I think manifesting generator is also one of those ones that until you understand that about yourself, it can be quite, something that you sort of have resistance to along the way. Was that your experience as well?
Definitely. You're so right because we're definitely not meant to be put in a box and yeah, and it doesn't sometimes make sense what we're doing and how we're shifting. And I've seen this in my own journey, like shifting so many times. But I also want to say that is a little bit of a contradiction in a sense, but to use all of these tools, whether it's human design or astrology, as a tool that is helpful and supportive, but not in a, I guess, too like rigid or dogmatic way, if that's the right word. And for example, uh, I've seen, for example, it applied to business as a manifesting generator. It's okay to do and change and all that, but
Mm,
in a sense, business also needs a little bit more focus, right?
yeah,
So if we're always doing that, then it's
yeah,
great as a hobby, but it's not super sustainable. So kind of breaking away from that and at the same time embracing it and seeing how to blend the two, I've been focusing more on a different kind of yeah, I've just been focusing more in my business on the coaching instead of doing all the things all the time and
yeah,
simplifying things and allowing my manifesting generator to be ignited in different ways outside of that, if that makes sense. So just kind of using it, and it really has been helpful in many ways, but also not allowing it to be too rigid and like, this is because you're a manifesting generator, you can't do that, or because you're a projector, you can't do that.
yeah.
That's not what
It's
I'm
not what it's
about.
for
And
either, I don't think. I
yeah.
think people can like really latch on to things and become
Hmm.
very stuck or almost
Yeah.
use these kind of things as an excuse. Like, for example,
Yes.
for us, Sagittarius, oh, I'm Sagittarius, so if I say something that offends someone, that's just because I'm Sagittarius. It's like,
That's
no,
just, yeah.
you can have an awareness that that is about to come out of your mouth and then go, I'm going to be compassionate and not,
I agree.
I don't need to always say what is on my mind. So
Right.
it's like it's looking at these things and these tools to have an awareness of yourself and where you sort of lean towards, and being able to then balance out those energies a little bit more and channel them so in a really productive way. So I think that
Absolutely.
that's what these tools bring to the party. And
I agree 100% with that. You're so right.
yeah. So describe in a little more detail the services that you offer and what it looks like to have a one-on-one coaching session with you, and getting intuitively in touch with your business.
Yes. So at the moment, as I said previously, I simplified my business. So I used to focus a lot on more courses and products and things like that. And right now, my intention is to work one on one with people more because of the transformation and just being able to help them in a much deeper way. So I offer free 30-minute value sessions where we look at already parts of the business and how we can make tweaks. And I really love giving value. So that's something I love to do. And at the end, if the person enjoyed the experience and had some insights and felt supported and we also align, we can also work together, but it's absolutely not necessary. Like, I'm always very open, and I think that's a new way of doing business, not forcing people or selling from a place of like, you need this, and I don't know. I've been on such weird calls sometimes with other people. So just, yeah, giving value and selling with soul.
Touching on that, actually, we can speak to that a little bit because I find it so strange that in the wellness holistic space, I see that all the time, like these very kind
Yeah.
of gimmicky sales pages of like, $1,000 worth of whatever for $7 or something like this. And I'm just like, we're, we're, we're meant to be discerning people. Like, we're in the space of discernment, and yet we're still using these kind of like, to me, I think they're very like 90s sales approaches, like very used car salesman sales approaches. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think that's interesting.
It is. And it's something that comes up a lot because, on the one hand, we have those old ways of selling. I feel that we are still I mean, I encounter quite frequently,
Yeah.
because I think maybe because I'm in the space and all that, I see a lot. So there's that on the one hand. And then on the other hand, the people that I work with a lot are people who then hate selling, and they're like, no, I can't sell. But then how can you run a business and not sell? There must be another way. And that's been a journey for me as well to embrace, because I was on that end of the spectrum, not wanting to sell at all. And
Yeah.
just like, whoever resonates, they'll find me, and like very like that. And there's nothing wrong with that
Yeah.
approach, but it's not always very effective.
Yeah.
So I felt like one of the things that I did this year was working on that perspective around selling, and a more soulful approach to selling, which is what I want to use in my business, and also encourage my clients to use, and people in general in my audience. So um, it's, I think, letting go of this forcing and pushing in general, or for example, random DMs or messages that you'll get from
Yeah.
people that you don't know that are selling to you, and that just does not feel right. It's also just, I think, leaning into what feels good for you. And selling can be sharing, it can be being of service, if you allow it to be that. So going back to, for example, how I see selling, I share a lot of what I do, and I do it because I know that I can help people, the right people, not everyone, obviously. And then I offer the a lot of value. I offer, I do free trainings and free challenges, and I love doing all the things that give a lot of value. And then I have these free calls, and at the end we can have a conversation that is, just person to person. Do we align? Can I maybe support you further? I never want to make anyone feel, forced to do something that they don't want. That's not empowering. Um, and at the same time, helping them see that selling is okay if done with integrity and heart and soul. So it's still tricky, I feel, because we still like see so much of that side of the spectrum that is kind of icky, and we don't like, and we don't feel comfortable around. And then we tend to like be, no, I can't, I don't like selling at all. But we have to kind of, I think, find a way to make it, I think it's all about service.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I see it, and bringing that together
Yeah,
again.
absolutely. And I think, look, whether it's right ideologically or not, but like we do live in a world where I personally think things need to be commercially viable. Like that's a reality.
Yes.
For something to be sustainable, they need to be commercially viable. And interestingly enough, sometimes it's actually not even commercial viability is not even just about making money. It's actually really an indicator as well if you are serving people, if what you're
Right.
putting out there is serving people. So I think that that's an interesting perspective to look at it. But I think you're right. I think there is this gap in between, like, this is how we've always sold things. And even though it doesn't feel right, that's just what you have to do. And then, oh, I hate selling things. And so there's a really interesting space there to rewrite how we operate commercially. So I think that that's very interesting, and I'm sure that's something that you cover in your coaching.
Yes, it definitely comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to be here, because that means we get to rewrite those rules, right?
Yeah.
Moving forward, um, in this new way of doing business and just living. So it's exciting times to be able to be a part of that, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I interrupted you there in the middle of you talking about
Oh,
what you
no
offer in
worries. I think it
the.
was good. It was a good, it was important, I feel, to talk about that. So then after that 30-minute free call, um, some people decide to, there's two ways that they can work with me currently. One is a 90-minute intensive, and it's mostly focused on content, because a lot of people struggle with how to create content in a way that is, authentic and works for them. So there's a few tips around human design, how to also create that in a way that is magnetic, and very authentic to you,
Yeah.
so that that's an intensive that I offer, and then there's a 3-month coaching program at the moment that is weekly sessions, unlimited support in between sessions. So
Wow.
there's a lot of support, and it's a very deep transformation. It's a journey, really. And I've been loving it. I've been really loving that. And yeah, so that's simplified version of working with me these days.
Yeah, amazing.
How it looks.
It's so interesting because it is quite a relatively new. I mean, business coaching has been around for a long time, but bringing in this element of like, what is your authentic expression in business? I think is something that we're really just stepping into. And I mean, probably in the last 5 to 10 years, it's sort of become something that's become magnetic. And I think really this year, I've definitely seen a lot of people going, hang on a second, we need to strip it back and be really real and really authentic in this space. So I think you're doing amazing work and amazing service in the world.
Thank you so much.
And what is one practical tip or practice that we can leave our listeners with that they could implement today if they're sort of feeling like if they're in their job or in their business or they're creating something, what is one thing that they can do to sort of tap into their authenticity and draw out that expression?
Very good question. Um,
Even a journal prompt or something like that.
um, I really like to recommend muscle testing,
Oh,
because that's a
wow.
really good way to lean into trusting yourself and asking questions to yourself and seeking for answers within, instead of always looking outside of yourself. So muscle testing, it's a podcast, so I can't really demonstrate this, but an easy way to do this, well, obviously you can Google everything these days, but an easy way to do this is to um, stand up, and have your feet hip hip distance, I guess, and just ask a question that you just to practice in the beginning, and can be small questions, and you can always test that with something that is 100% true. So my name is X, and then the opposite, um, and see if your body leans naturally forward or back. And forward is usually a yes or a positive answer, and then leaning back is usually a no. So yeah, so that gives us indications. It's not 100% accurate, but I think it's about the trust and building trust with yourself, and knowing that your body already knows.
Yeah.
So and learning to trust your intuition. So I don't know if that is the tip that was maybe expected,
No,
but I
that's
think
really
it's a
cool.
really good practice. And I use this quite often to just give me an indication of where I'm at with something. It can be small decisions, bigger decisions, and obviously we don't just base ourselves on that, but it does give us an indication, and it's mostly about developing that trust muscle.
Yeah.
Which yeah, so that is my tip for today.
That's fantastic. That's amazing. No, I wasn't expecting that at all. I was like, oh, she's going to do some meditation or a journal prompt or something. But that's really cool. And I think that that's something that I've definitely found interesting this year as well, is like this embodiment. And, we are so bombarded with the most ridiculous amount of information these days. Yeah. And so it's so important to be able to begin to know that everything is already the answer's already within you. And so to have these sort of ways of tuning into that, I think is so useful. So thank you for sharing that with us. And yeah, I love it. And so what's next for you? Do you have any new projects you're working on, or what are we doing? What are we going to see from you moving into the new year?
Into the new year, I'm actually focusing on being focused on what I've been working on the past few months. So in my business, and I just really want to show up, give a lot of value, which I've already been doing. I have a podcast, I have a Facebook group, I have social media, so I give a lot of value that way, and I want to continue doing that, and because I love it and I enjoy it, and I know that people can benefit a lot from that, and just continue refining the way I work in 2021. So I think it's just doing that with more focus and intention, and it feels really exciting. It's nothing very new, but it feels very exciting to me because it's like I feel like I laid the foundations in 2020 and at least the second half of it, and now I get to master that in a sense, and yeah, and build on that. So that's what's next for me for now.
Amazing, amazing. And where can our listeners find you if they'd like to know more about your work?
So I am on Instagram a lot, at Sarah Lewis Co. So yeah, Sarah Lewis Co. I think it'll probably be in the show notes, right?
Yeah.
And my website is sarahlewis.co.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there. There's also a link to my podcast, which is Ignited Soulpreneur. It used to be Heart Space, and I changed it recently, rebranded that. And yeah, that's the main places to find me and connect.
Amazing, amazing. And before I leave you, is there anything else on your heart that you'd really like to share with our listeners that I haven't asked you about yet?
Let's see if there's anything that wants to come out. I think it's that. I think it's about alignment. It's about really learning to trust yourself more and aligning yourself with your heart. It's simple, really. It doesn't have to be so complicated. And yes, there's so many tools and it's amazing. Have fun with that. But always come back to the simplicity of, you know, your heart and trusting yourself and knowing that everything is already in you, as we were saying before, and living with that alignment of heart and mind and body and soul in a sense. Yeah, I think that's what it's about.
Amazing, amazing. Sarah, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining me again,
Same.
and I look forward to catching up with you again soon in the new year.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for having me, Claire. Again, it was so wonderful, and I love our connection and our talks. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode and you got some things to take away from our amazing guests' insight. If you did enjoy this episode, please subscribe and also leave us a review. And for more information on the Hadassah Collective, you can visit our Instagram page at Hadassah Collective. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode at the same time next week. And until then, have a wonderful week.